Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have here people that, Josh is here, the new CTO, and myself, I'm Ganesh, the head of architecture of TypeDB. We've been in the company for quite a long time, I think. It's been a while. And we have ourselves special guests.
Hey, what's up, people? I'm Ganesh, the head of architecture at TypeDB. So we've been thinking there's a lot of things going on in the community that's definitely worth sharing. So we decided to try this new podcast format where we talk about basically things worth sharing in the community. And we're going to start with what we dubbed the TypeDB Origin series. And here in Origin, we're going to talk about basically the evolution of the company from what used to be known as Grakn all the way to what is now known as TypeDB. There's going to be some technical discussions about our decisions, mainly when we decided to switch from Java to Rust. I think that's also going to be quite interesting to share. And yeah, finally, this is new format. So do watch and tell us what you think about it. Hop on Discord, join the community. And I hope you enjoy.
Someone
joining us.
Particular character, yes, joining us. So why don't you introduce yourself, James?
I'm James, and back in the day, I don't know, it's quite a few years ago now, I was also at TypeDB as principal scientist. At least that was the name that you give to someone who's in a startup, but whether or not that's what they actually spend all their time doing is a different story as the things go, right? So I've moved on to do other things now, but I still keep in touch with these guys. So here we are talking about days gone by and
yes, it's definitely been a while, right?
And where we've come from in some ways.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. Like we joined like 7 years ago ish, I think.
Yeah, so
same time.
I think you joined 7.5 years ago and I joined about half year after that, and you probably joined.
I was 2 weeks before you.
Just before me. So we were here back when the company was called Grakn, and that is the beginning of our also friendship, but the engineering story for me in particular, and you were more of a entrepreneur on the hardware side as well, and you had a lot of development experience across the board, right?
Yeah. In a way, the perks of being the oldest one.
I thought you were an intern.
There is that joke.
That's always young.
There is a joke, yeah. And the company's been around for a while. We've transitioned through different phases, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we first joined the company, in 2017, 2018 was quite a different place. So why don't we start kind of reminiscing how it used to be in the
pool
past.
table.
The ping pong table.
Yeah.
The pipes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
We don't need to talk about the pipes.
I've forgotten about the pipes.
Let's.
But I mean, so the company, when it was founded, was in London, in North London, and we had a pretty small office, probably for about 12 people, and we had reserved a bunch of space for the ping pong table, which helped us solve a lot of problems, and where we bonded and hashed things out really, and spent a lot of time going back and forth about what to do and what to build, and really some of the problems that we had to solve.
Quite a lot of language design chats is one of the predominant things that I remember there, and sort of quite philosophical over, like, because quite a lot of the language and the maxims for the language that we have now was well in place by that time. Right? But definitely some of the stuff that I was doing, because I kind of fell into solution engineer stuff as well, right? And I was building out projects for people and trying to use the product in earnest.
Mm-hmm.
And we could see how it was useful, but also all the edge cases of the language that we wanted to have were really not filled in. Right, like I think even as I joined, like the intro project I was doing, that's when we could start to see that we were already straining like the limits of what we could do in the database, just trying to really use it to solve a problem that we had in front of us.
Yeah, the spirit was quite different back then. It was a lot more, say, researchy.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of researchers basically still building kind of like the early stage of the kind of like the engine of some sort, right?
Exactly. I think from my experience, when I was basically fresh out of university when I joined, and I was coming into a early startup kind of situation where the product level was still pretty early. So we have a fun and many interesting anecdotes about Ganesh being our boot up and shutdown engineer
I think the first 2 years or something I was there, you were trying to
consistent boot ups and consistent shutdowns in the kind of complicated architecture.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. For context, right? We know TypeDB as a database that you run today, but back in the days, it wasn't even like a software. It's basically a massive piece of things that we strung together. I think we use Cassandra under the hood, and then we have like Redis. And
what was this Grakn like?
1.5 was
1.3
when I joined.
Right. Maybe even earlier.
Yeah, like I think even earlier. I think 1.5 is already like one where
it was stable.
improved
it booted
quite well,
right?
Such a way that it boots. It didn't yet stop, but it boots.
It booted.
Yes.
Hey, Control C is hard, Sometimes you have to catch that signal.
Very, very researchy. Very like I think the Grakn itself was just kind of like a stateless app on top of Cassandra and Redis and whatnot. There was Kafka as well in the mix.
And I think a lot of that focus back then was on developing the language and understanding the underpinnings of the language and focusing on this entity relation attributes model and what you can do with it and how expressive it is. So I think there was a lot of that initial science and thinking about what does negation do in the context of a query language like Grakn and the rules it had.
Yeah, I mean, we had Casper working that out like in a big way, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was a big project.
Particularly because we were committed until quite recently, right? Until TypeDB, until it took that name instead, committed to first order logic. And so what negation meant needed to be
clauses,
needed to be really sound, right? Otherwise it was not going to make the whole thing would fall down. Which probably should have been a little bit of when I look, it's very easy with the hindsight, but if you look back at that, like the fact that it was so complex for us to figure out how we should be doing was probably the signal that we should try and make sure that
simplify
this was
things
simpler. And I think, it's only when you really pick at these things, right? And I think that was one of the lessons we always came away from, was just like find hygiene factors and really lean into those, really lean really hard into those to like any code smell, if your design smell, if you like, is easier dealt with like the sooner you can, and ask the hard questions as soon as possible rather than delaying, because now we have like functions, right, which is then just trivial to explain to programmers rather than we have a first order logic engine and they go, so why is that better? And we go, well, we think it is.
Be careful.
But be careful.
And I think along with the language, I think also there was a lot of architectural learnings from the early days, especially coming in as mostly young engineers and scientists and people with PhDs and less development experience. I mean, I think you, as probably one of the most senior people now, and back then also with more experience, what would you take away from that phase of engineering, from the architecture and the learnings from it?
Well, I mean, like when I first joined the company, like obviously it looks like the company does a very cool thing. That was quite interesting. But then like, boy, was I in for a surprise. Because it was comprised of so many components that I don't know which one was actually the component that we're building, right? So that was when I first joined. And I think obviously from that point, we've transitioned towards making it into like a real serious product, like a real database that actually behaves in a way that is like productized and is supposed to be how a database behaves, right? So I think we've definitely gone a long way from that. It's a lot more, I think, it's definitely something that engineer would find quite familiar to like what a database should look like, should behave, and should be generally. We've definitely had to go through several transitions from the early days in which like it was still called Grakn, just graph knowledge, and all the way to today, in which it's called TypeDB at version 3. So why don't we
go through that a little bit?
What do you think? Like, how would you like
the way?
Transitions?
I mean, the way I've conceptualized it in my head, and maybe this is a post-rationalization because I know the whole story and where it's gone to now. But the way I think about it is Grakn 1.0 was still the research prototype in some ways. And people were using it to build a lot of prototypey things, but not really in production and for serious things at the end of the day. And so as the product was evolving, the architecture complexity was increasing, and we eventually hit a point in time where we realized that the software is too hard to maintain. It had become too much of a mess and too entangled, and we were trying to untangle all these dependencies and circularity issues and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, we decided not only is that an issue, but we're starting to understand the product requirements, not just the research and conceptual requirements, I would say. And that basically said, okay, well, one of the things we need a couple of big new features like negations and being able to do some arithmetic and computation in the language. But also we need some more performance. And that is, I think, ultimately what prompted the Grakn 1.8 was the last version, I believe, 1.8, to the rewrite into 2.0. And that was led by a couple of people on the team. Heikel was involved, I was involved, you were involved. I think you were doing machine learning at the time, I think. So, but a lot of that was.
Well, I came in with the reasoning engine. That's what
you did. You did join in the reasoning engine.
So yeah, because we
also rewrote that.
That was a big deal, wasn't it? I mean, you and I spent that was some fun. That was
good whiteboarding.
Some engineering fun. You and I were regularly until midnight for like a year trying to build that reasoning engine.
Right. To make it parallel.
Because I think we did with Grakn 2.0. And that was the time where the rebrand actually happened, right?
A little bit after, but in my rationalization, it's basically Grakn to 2.0 is the rewrite into.
And that was from
Java
to
clean Java,
and a load of stuff to just like
clean Java, and first version with RocksDB, where we threw out Cassandra, we threw out Janus Graph, we threw out Kafka.
You own more of the stack.
We owned a lot more of the stack.
Yeah.
And then in my head, that's also about the time when we started to realize this thing is more than just a knowledge graph.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know who.
I mean, I think that had been the ambition from the start, because the conception of the company, which we probably don't have time to go into today, but that starts with trying to build a database for semantic search, right? So one thing, a database, but something that looked knowledge graphy was always there, right, and was always core, but the perception that we had was that we were like a project for research people doing stuff with knowledge graphs, and knowledge graphs was so nascent then.
Yeah, right? It's true. There was a lot of education. Nascent. Remember all the conversations about what's a knowledge graph?
And trying to do machine learning over knowledge graphs at that time was mad. That we had like almost nothing, and then suddenly that space has exploded since. Right?
Yeah, I do think that we were at the time at the point where, at some point, I think the term knowledge graph can mean anything, because it can mean nothing and anything at the same time. And I felt like that was the point where we think it's not very useful for us to attach ourselves to something that is like just so malleable in terms of meaning that people have different kinds of connotations or things that they think it can do. They think this is a problem, a solution to a problem, whereas it's actually slightly less or even more than that. And I think that was a point where we tried to define our own identity in the way that we see what does the product do.
And it was, I think, the change of the name from Grakn to TypeDB was really a realization of what we had built. And realizing that this looks really strongly like a type system, and it's on the data. It's not just in the programming language, but you're like programming the database and you're typing the data. So I think that was a big realization, and then implementation of the rebrand then led to its own issues. I would say I think we had some struggles,
to put it lightly.
Right. But
I mean, that almost crashed the company.
That led to some years, like a couple of years of pain. In fact, I would say in some ways we're catching up now.
Well, from what I'm hearing is that any of the kind of outreach, there's a lot of people who knew about Grakn. It had its own little cult following, and then it was quite widely known after this but as Grakn, right? And then suddenly we introduced TypeDB, and it was not made clear, like, to all the people who, like, you couldn't reach, I think, all the people that had heard it somewhere on the grapevine. So that's an issue, because while we reached everyone as like an interesting project, we're not reaching them as a product that they can use right then, because it just wasn't ready for that, right? Yeah. So then you make that transition over into a product that they can use whilst also changing the name, and people are confused. And now a lot of people don't know that Grakn and TypeDB are the same thing.
Have the same roots,
right?
Yeah.
It's just the product. TypeDB is just the productized version of what Grakn was. You can do everything and more that you could do with Grakn. I mean, much more robustly, but you that you also get the benefit, and this is why that like name change, the semantics of that was important, right? Was to show people this is a general tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
This can go. You can swap this out for MongoDB or Neo4j.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're a Grakn, and I like that contraction is interesting. I think most people won't know that was knowledge graph. They just think you're imitating the Kraken, right? Everyone's like, oh, release the Grakn, all this stuff. Right?
We had a lot of good,
but that just added confusion really to what the brand was really trying to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think honing in on, like you say, in the most general sense, just the language. That was the thing that people liked the most, was that they didn't have to do, you could talk about normal forms in the database, right? That was actually the technical specifics, right? Rather than having to do this third normal form stuff that you have to do when you
just build your model the way you do on the whiteboard.
You just, broadly speaking, do like the best modeling that people know, humans still know how to do, seems to be just like drawing nodes on a whiteboard and connecting them together, right? Yeah. And now that is your data model. You just insert the data into that and it validates.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, I think that's the thing that, like, even back in the days we did, I think, quite well, was the language, like looking at 1.x, because basically I think from that point onward, all the way to when we're starting to productize, the language actually changed very little, and people are quite happy about
Especially through 2.0, it changed less.
Yeah.
I think for 2.0 to 3.0, then the transition looked a little different.
Yeah.
It was more about performance and refining the features and refining the language. But for 2.0, we were rebuilding the stack with less technical debt and making it more production ready.
So mathematically sound becomes mathematically sound
and architecturally sound. And then the 2.0 to 3.0 transition, which was really as you said, rough edges. There were still a lot of rough edges in 2.0. Yeah. And I think people got further into implementation and into building products, and they would still hit these rough edges, I would say, pretty critically. And so what we've done is 3.0, the rewrite that came out this year, was collecting 1 to 4 years of feedback, depending from the 1.0 issues into the 3.0 features, and then going forward.
Coalescing that. I mean, because that was you. I mean, you were in the driving seat for that.
3.0.
Exactly 3.0.
Yeah.
And rewriting in Rust was clearly the right thing, right? Because we're doing a systems level thing. Mm-hmm. So you want that granularity of control over what's going on. And what I think is also really, what's also kind of noteworthy is that Java and the modeling language for Java doesn't necessarily let you do all the things that you need to be able to do, like you can in Rust. Like a trait-based modeling language allows you to, you have a lot more flexibility to actually build what is a flexible modeling language. That is TypeQL, right? But also shore up all those details. I'd forgotten like how much of
so many the list of things we did in 3.0 while pushing the performance was actually quite long.
But this is only because you'd accrued all the knowledge of all those edge cases were, that you went down to that foundational level and rebuilt that, knowing which of those edge cases were about to trip you up, right? Yeah. And actually, when I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, how you see all the memes of like the different like stupid edge cases of JavaScript? Mm-hmm. We basically had those, right? We had all sorts of just like, which most users wouldn't encounter, but we were like, oh God, this. Like the modeling language would just fray at the edges over here until you had everything cohesive. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't work all the way through until that foundation was like really there to support the whole thing all the way out, right?
Yeah.
I think the way I conceptualize the whole story now is 1.0 to 2.0 was productionizing the architecture and refining things, and also maturity as a team of engineers, going from researchers / junior engineers into being, I would say, like, because we're still operating on the Java level, I would almost say like application level developers doing systems engineering. And then the 3.0 transition is we're using Rust, we're thinking about memory layouts, we're thinking about optimization and performance, and then doing that as systems engineers rather than just like Java application level engineers. So to me, this has been a journey of not just like learning the product and the product development, but also the team evolving over time and getting better and deeper into what is a legitimate database and what are we doing with that. And then that stretches everywhere from the language to the implementation of the core product to the cluster and the replicated version and everything we've learned along the way with Raft and replication that way.
Yeah, and I think even as a company as well, and the name of the product as well, I think it's been reflected. Like the name Grakn, I felt like it's always been quite like playful, right? And then we transitioned to a name that is like a lot more mature, TypeDB, I believe. You know, like it puts the product in the space that people expect to, because well, if the database has a name that ends with DB. And you know, there's other like MongoDB and CockroachDB.
Yeah, you want to have a DB in there.
Yeah, and then like we are actually very big on type system, right? That's how we kind of like envision how our schema, what is our schema be mainly comprised of. Well, there's languages like TypeScript, which is like very type safe. So we use the word type as well there. So TypeDB is this like little elegant name that.
And it was kind of surprising, but at the same time not, that TypeDB was kind of available and unused as a name.
Yeah.
Right, because this is the first database that we're aware of that has like that type safety built at some scale. Right, yeah. There was like the real push. So like,
and there's so many ways of thinking about that, but like I like to think of it in many ways the way that Rust added a really good type systems for systems languages like C and even the corners of C++ is like we are taking in many ways the raw database landscape and adding that type system evolution that SQL never had at that same granularity and depth.
There's so many parallels with Rust and TypeDB that I see where, for example, one of the things we've always had real difficulty with is explaining the benefit of TypeDB, right? Yeah. Because the reality is it's a rethink of what a database should look like. The same way Rust is a rethink of what a systems language should look like.
Yeah, and we're not just aggregating we're not doing like multimodal is not just document plus graph plus relational. It's actually a generalization and an alternative way of thinking about these things.
Yeah.
But if you rethink something at every point, it becomes very difficult to pin down. Like, what's the one core feature? Yeah. You go, well. Yeah. It's programming at the database because that is the only way that we can like kind of catch all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. But that doesn't include stuff like being ASIC compliant or the fact that you can do like database migrations in like a really seamless way, because that isn't something everyone already has a conceptualization of as part of a programming language. That's just imagine you rewrote databasing and put programming language on the database and then did all the other things that you thought you wanted, but they were baked in. So that it was kind of easy from the start, and that's a really difficult value prop to get across, and that's why I analogize it. One of the reasons I analogize that to Rust, because Rust doesn't try to say we're an object-oriented programming language, we're this, we're that. Right. Yeah. It says we're a programming language that has traits and borrow checking and
memory management.
Exactly.
All of these things.
And it just lists out these things, and people who are in the know look at it, look at the spec, and go, everyone, we should use this. This is really cool. This fulfills a lot of gaps, right? And I think that's kind of one of the struggles we've had the whole way through with. Particularly when you move from knowledge graph, actually, because when you're knowledge graphs, and people who knew they wanted to make knowledge graphs make knowledge graphs with them, right? But I mean, commercially also, that was one of our issues. We would only get like research people building knowledge graphs at that time, right? Whereas we're trying to build something that's going to be a real product that's going to power like
many
live systems, right? Like real-time data.
And it's been designed from the ground up now to be a real-time transactional database. It can do any of the, I guess, applications you'd imagine SQL in. It should be able to handle those, and it should be able to handle, because of how general it is, anything you can use a graph database in, accepting analytics, which we don't have right now. But
I mean, you've even got the great evidence now, the benchmark. Neo4j, I saw this came out.
Yeah, that came out a little while ago. So we're now competitive with Neo4j, which has been our long-term goal since
we joined. At scale, right? Like
at scale. Yeah, exactly. So Neo4j doesn't scale nearly as well as they should, really, honestly.
Yeah.
And we've hit that benchmark now, which is great.
Yeah.
And if anything, that was something we talked about when we joined 7 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it's been that long. Where you think things are and where you think
it takes longer
where things actually are.
Well, number one lesson from 7 years as a small company is everything takes longer than you think it does. Probably by about 2x. That's about my margin.
Yep. And now that we're here, we are, we have a lot more features. We kept the good parts of the language.
We refined it. We've made it more performant. We've made it so much more stable. It's really reliable now. We power several systems internally with TypeDB itself. So I guess where does it go now?
Yeah, like I think like where do you think the company is going to go now? So we went from very researchy to
First phase of productization,
Yeah.
and then to, I guess, now commercialization in some ways.
yeah, right. Okay.
I think that's the phase we're in, is
Okay.
commercializing.
Okay. Like, can you elaborate a little bit more about like where specifically in the commercialization do you think will be in the next, say, 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and maybe from the outside, from having left the company and building your own company now as an entrepreneur, you're seeing what we're doing maybe differently from when you were here, so you have a bit of insight on what commercialization looks like. But to me, commercialization looks a lot like figuring out what the people that come to us really need, and working on those things and working with our community. And then in many ways, we just want TypeDB to be used by as many people and in real production applications as possible. So commercialization for us right now doesn't even look like we need to make all the money at once. It's like we want TypeDB to be a popular, widely used database. And that's my primary goal in many ways, even though I'm a technical guy. We've spent so much energy and late nights, and I'm not sure there's been that many tears, but there's been a couple of tears when it was Christmas Eve and releasing for a client that needs something. And so that's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and you want that to show and pay off. And so there's that push right now. But I'm curious what you see from now being out for 1.5 or 2 years or something, and from the outside in, because you've left right before the commercialization started kicking off and the 3.0 rewrite started kicking off. And so I want to hear what you see from a close observer, as who still hangs out with us sometimes. But
I think it's really interesting to, when you're building your own product and you look at the landscape of what there is out there. As it happened, I didn't end up needing a database. I thought I might. I thought we really did think TypeDB was going to get baked into what we're building at the moment, but it hasn't been, for lack of needing a database. But what I see is, what I think has been really interesting. I mean, I can't believe we've actually gone this whole conversation without using the word AI. But, but what is so interesting is how it sits in that landscape, and how we've seen a lot of other databases coming around there, but still none of them actually, to me, really sit right next to TypeDB. It's a very different thing. It's a very different kettle of fish compared to all the rest. And I kind of just am interested to see how long it's going to take for the industry to cotton on to that. I think it's only going to take like a few landmark things to happen, like clients to build something really that, like household names, basically building on it, for people to then go, oh, okay, and wisen up a little bit on that. And in particular, I think what's crazy is that, and I think you see this as a common pattern, like we also expected technology to be outside TypeDB to be further than it was when we were doing stuff, right? So we were trying to do knowledge graph stuff, but people were trying to do querying from natural language. And people have been for decades now, right? But we were still trying that in 2018, 2020, whatever it was, right? Limited success. Now with an LLM,
you can do it,
right? And TypeDB was set up to be a semantic search engine, right? You can build your own Google essentially internally, right? Well, now with an LLM, you can actually do that, right? And you can get over the fact that you can have exact answers to inexact questions. That's kind of it, right? Like we're starting to get into this phase where you can start to marry up the fuzzy and the unfuzzy, right? And I think that space is going to be really, really interesting, and TypeDB is incredibly well placed to be because the flexibility of it means that, for example, if you've got an agentic AI that's working over a database, it can do the migrations really quite trivially that it needs to do in TypeDB.
And this is really something we have not talked about enough, is how great TypeDB is for mutation of schema and evolution of schema, which in other databases is a complete pain.
This hasn't been disseminated like almost at all. And really should be, because it means that, for example, if you have like a corpus of information and you want to actually make something structured out of that, right? That used to be an incredibly large challenge to do entity resolution on all of that stuff and figure out the connections, right? Now, whether it's accurate or not, and I'm sure that, we know that all this stuff is just getting better at such a crazy rate, you're going to be able to just throw that to an LLM and have a structured output and say, create the schema out of this, as well as the data that's going to feed in from this. And you can grow your schema organically, right? In a way that means that you can then query your database to see like what information as a sum total, even if it's partial, do I have from my 10 billion documents I've fed through or whatever it is, right? And you can see that schema laid out for you and then know what you can query.
And it's all validated and structured on the fly, yeah.
It's all done.
What do you...
And you've already got the vibe querying, right? You've already got that in
We've got
Studio
some
now,
AI
so
querying built in,
that
natural
already
language
someone can like get started with TypeQL in particular, because there's always a learn. It's a very natural thing to read, but you've always got to learn a language to use
write
a language,
it.
right?
Yes.
So that can like really bootstrap you to just like see something in your domain, like we know is really useful with AI, right? Like you can just get straight into like what's your problem.
Bootstrap yourself, basically.
Bootstrap something, see it working, see that it has all the features that you need, and then you can actually get moving, right? But what I think is really interesting is we're going to see that not just as an interface to use our like TypeDB tool, but for external parties to bake into their products, that they can have users directly ask stuff that's going to directly query the database, come back. I think once that's clearly a huge thing at the moment. I think all the commercialization is around companies with a sufficient pain that they need a maintainable structured data store, right? But we're not seeing yet big movers from an AI angle coming and saying like, oh, we really need to.
Yeah, we haven't explored the dynamic schemas yet. That's still coming down the pipe, I think. And from your point of view, what do you see as this phase of the company?
I think the bit that is most interesting for me personally is the fact that we are starting to build things around our core product. It used to be for the last...
I would say we have a stack now.
Exactly, right? Like it used to be just the core product with like just very minimal bells and whistles. But you know, for a product to be successful, you need to have like lots of things around it. Like you look at like mature databases such as Postgres, MySQL, you have like different things that the communities have built around it that makes the entire development workload a lot more efficient and a lot more productive. Like, you know, think like be able to like take a backup, being able to basically manage schema migration, because obviously your application will need to evolve, right? So I think these are the bits that we as a company are focusing right now to make the life of you TypeDB users a lot more, you know, at ease. And I think I'm quite excited with the fact that some of our community members have also started to submit
build real open source legitimate products that are solving their own problems, and whether that's one of our customers vibe querying up a visualizer and another one writing a legitimate Pydantic extension, you know, this is really cool momentum to see. And as always, we are I don't think we've talked about this much, but because TypeDB is open source, and we interact with our community a lot on Discord and stuff, we are always really open to help people do their projects, chip in, manage things. We'll adopt projects into our secondary organization on GitHub. So, you know, we are always available to promote and build in the open source as well. So it's really exciting to see production level kind of systems being built around TypeDB.
It shows a great belief, doesn't it? That community that's been there that whole time. Now we start to see that you get those movements where people are really putting stakes in the ground and saying, and I think I'm going to build around this. This is a core. This is something solid.
And also I'm going to publish this work. The bit that I can publish, I'm going to open source it. It's always quite exciting to see. Like this is, I think, how the momentum will build up.
And I think it's excellent to see, and in many ways to kind of look back to the beginning a bit. A lot of the pain points, I think the journey of any startup in general, but also particularly for us, has been since I joined as a very junior engineer to now, and I'm sure for you and in your own company, to go from learning all the lessons along the way and then obviously prioritizing what needs to be built at every point along that way to the best of your knowledge. But now looking back, so many of those key problems that have been plaguing us since 7 years ago and then 5 years ago and then into 3.0, I think we're really seeing that the main tranche of bottlenecks and things that were holding people back have been eliminated now. And the core is ready to drive, and it's being used and it's being hit hard. And then now we're looking at, okay, now what is the developer experience to improve that? And the cool thing is now with AI especially, people are writing their own tools on the fly, just generating them. It doesn't need to be perfect to do this like on the fly little thing I need, but also building out the ecosystem. And that is, I think, the next phase we're in is commercialization, building out the developer experience, and talking to users ultimately, seeing what they need and what's coming down the pipe is now being largely shaped by people we talk to.
Yeah, and also like building more resources. We're writing more tutorials. We're,
exactly.
like, publishing more
helping
content.
the adoption process.
Yeah, definitely revamping the docs.
So, what would be your? Let's say do a little wrap up here. What's the short summary of what you say is the history of the company and the learning that you've got along the way?
Things take, I think as you were talking just now, I was thinking things take a lot longer. I'm really struggling with that with my own company at the moment, right? Things take a lot longer to get where you want them to be.
Especially, I think, in an engineering-led organization where you want to do things, deep tech, and you want to do things the right way. I think one of the things we pride ourselves is we build things, especially the core things that are sensitive, we build things the right way and we take the time to do it.
I think that's right. And I think actually probably the right thing, if you were going to try and take hindsight advice from it, it's to go deeper earlier. As long as you can find a way to get the company to survive. That's the thing. With a deep tech play like this, you need to lean into the fact that you're going really deep, right? And like you were talking about, it's taken 2 rewrites of the database to actually iron out the issues that we knew were there. And that's why you can speak to customers, but you're like, I can't even implement what you want me to implement yet because I haven't even fixed all the stuff that I know needs fixing, right?
Yeah.
And getting to a hygiene level that you're ready to be able to do that stuff, and then you can get that in a loop cycle actually sped up, and you can really iterate. That's tricky. And that, I think, is the teething issue that we've gone through. But I think you can't avoid that. You have to have jitter as you try and move through that startup journey at the start, right? You have to explore and see what's what. And also, that early phase, you need something out there relatively quickly to get the value. That's what we got from Grakn. We got validation. People wanted it because people were saying, "Oh, the language is really cool. This is great. This actually serves a purpose, right?" And then you go away and you commercialize it. So you've got to try and balance these factors. But as soon as you got the evidence, then you need to just note it down, because maybe we could have only done it in one rewrite.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe. I think there's a lot of lessons for us as entrepreneurs and engineers. Is maybe sometimes we should have taken a bigger bet. Sometimes we should have skipped bets and looked at just gone to the users and seen what they were doing earlier. Yeah. And there's a lot of lessons. Just the rebrand itself had none of it was smooth, and now we would know so much better, honestly. But that's just the journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would you say is the summary for you from Grakn till today?
I think if I were to start from what I'm seeing now, that I quite appreciate is the fact that I think we've always been pragmatic, but I think we're taking it to a new level. We're realizing that things may take longer, but obviously as a business, we need to start making some progress on the commercial side. So what is the thing that we need to do? What are the things that we need to do in order to minimize the steps to get to that side of things, which is completely different kinds of problem than what we were solving back in the days, which is how do we even make this thing start? So it's been an evolution, I would say. Quite exciting working on different things at different times, solving different kinds of different phases of the company, right?
From boot up engineer to cluster engineer, right?
To now building our ecosystem as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's about it. That's it from my side. Anything that you guys want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to put. I would say my summary is it's been an incredible journey from early prototype, I would say, to building a real systems-led, deep tech, hardcore database, and all the fun engineering that led along the way. But also, I think along the way we've built an incredible team as well. I would say one of our strengths has been the people we've collected along the way. So we have an awesome team of people who have learned with us. We generally all started pretty young, and we've evolved, and we've all now, everyone at the company has been here 2 or 3 years plus, up to probably 7 or 8 years is the longest tenure right now. And so that has been a huge strength, and having a lot of cultural knowledge and maintaining the culture of engineering and correctness and love for design and the language and stuff like that. So I think it's been really fun to see the people evolve, to see the product evolve, and it's just really exciting to now try to really push it out and make it grow into being what we know it can be, which is a real system that is there to ideally in my mind like replace SQL and graph databases,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's a stepwise journey, and we'll start that
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot today.
Yeah,
it's
this was
been
fun as well.
to
Had some good
reminisce, like how it used to be in the days. Anything else to add, guys?
Nothing from me,
me?
thanks.
That was
yeah,
fun.
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. Great chat. All right, guys. I think that's all from us. And I'll see you guys again next time.